It's the Poojie Podcast, proudly sponsored by Cimarron Golf Club. What is going on, Pooj crew? Thank you for being here for episode 110 of the Poojie Podcast. Excited to have you here and excited for this episode. First and foremost, shout out to Cimarron Golf Club for always helping support and sponsor the podcast. Love what they do over there at Cimarron off County Road 210. Actually just got out to play the other day and enjoyed the hell out of it. Beautiful setup right now, beautiful course. It's in great condition. Definitely go check out Cimarron. The greens are looking good as well. If you're in Jacksonville and you're looking for a new track to play, go check out Cimarron. But a busy weekend in sports. Obviously, we're here to talk Jacksonville Jaguar football, here to talk about the NFL. But quick shout out to the United States Ryder Cup team getting the dub at Whistling Straits a year after it was supposed to be played. Fantastic job by them, winning 19-9 against Europe. The format is awesome. The pageantry is exceptional, and it's one of the best moments in all of sports, no matter if you're a golf fan or not. It's just awesome being able to pull for the United States, who has struggled recently against Team Europe over the last 2 decades or so. They've blown some big leads. They haven't had the best of luck. So I believe that was their third victory over the last 11 Ryder Cups, I want to say. So it was exciting watching the 12 best Americans versus the 12 best Europeans, and it's always a fun time, and it was a great crowd. I know the fans were excited to get back 1 year removed from when it was supposed to be. We are in the dog days of summer with baseball here. The playoff push is here as well, so exciting times for you baseball fans out there. I know the Yankees and the Blue Jays and the Red Sox, they're jockeying for position in the AL East, and the Tampa Bay Rays have already clinched the division and the best record in baseball, I think it is. The Giants are like the sleeper team this year. So the playoffs is going to be fun, and hockey's coming back. My Tampa Bay Lightning play a preseason game tonight against Matt Maynard, my roommate, his Carolina Hurricanes. But for right now, let's welcome in Jacob Urtical onto the podcast. Jacob, I appreciate you being here, and I'm ready to talk some Jags football with you, man. Oh, well, you're muted. We're good.
I said, I muted myself for your little intro. I don't like to cause too much. But yeah, I'm excited. We'll see how the conversation goes. There's great things to talk about. Psych. No, there's definitely some positives to take from, but I'm sure we'll talk about some bad, some good. Looking forward with a young team that we got so far.
Well, you mentioned the positives. I just want to say this. Out of the first 3 games, I am a strong believer that was the best performance we put on the field out of the first
Absolutely.
3 games. And it's inspiring because that was by far the toughest opponent we've played in the first 3 weeks. The opponents have gotten tougher each week, and that was the best we've played. Is this a situation where the Jaguars are just playing up to the competition, or is this actually they are authentically getting better as a team? Like this is not fiction. They are getting better as the weeks progress.
I would like to think that they're getting better. It'll be interesting to see how they play Thursday against the Bengals, just because I do think the Bengals are a drop-off from the Cardinals. But yeah, I think the first week against the Texans, I didn't want to overlook those veteran players the Texans have, but I think that result might have been an outlier. I think there's a lot of new on the team, and the way it happened, I don't think that's indicative of the entire season. So week 2, it looked a little better, but week 3, I mean, we'll probably get into it, but I think that game was a lot closer than it looks on the scoreboard, and there's a lot of good things to take away from it, from, the top scoring team in the league right now by points per game. So I do think they're getting better. I think the defense is potentially going to end the season better than people gave it credit for coming in. And then Trevor Lawrence, hopefully he just continues to get better because he's going to be the X factor for the franchise.
Yeah, and honestly, kind of Poojie coming back down to earth from trying to be overly excited. I feel like I've been realistic for the most part during the process from the offseason up until now. Just being as realistic as possible. The front 7 for the Jaguars has played above expectation. The front 4 has looked really well. Like we're a top 10 rush defense in the league right now. We've held a lot of rushers in check. And overall, the team has been more competitive from start to finish. And this was about as excited as we could have been as late in the game as possible. I mean, we're up 13-7 going into halftime after a wild kick 6, 109 yards by Jamal Agnew, which we'll get into that play here in a sec. We go into halftime. We come out of halftime. We then go up 19-10. And at that point, 3 minutes left in the third quarter. It's looking inspiring. We're about to pull off a huge upset in the NFL world. The Cardinals march down the field and do what they do, which I think a lot of us expected them to do most of the
Yep.
day, was to just march the ball down the field and score. They bring it back to 19-7, and then the big pick six happens on the flea flicker. Was it necessary? Was it a energy boost play call? What was that? Who knows? The pick six happens, and then from there, you could just feel the air fall out of the stadium. It felt like the Cardinals had full control at that point. I think they put one more touchdown on the board, and they end up completing the deal 31-19. So an inspiring performance for a team that we expected very little from. However, there's still much to be desired from the offense as far as moving the ball downfield more consistently. Trevor Lawrence making those smart decisions, not throwing the pick sixes, which he took full blame for. But I just want your overall thoughts just in general on how the game went, if anything stood out to you or what your thoughts were.
Well, here's how I view this game. We ended up losing 31-19, and that's obviously not a great score to lose by. But Lambeau, who has been a problem, he hurt himself last year, hurt his hip, and he hasn't come back from that well. 2 missed extra points. So, okay, let's hypothetically, and I don't like to overall just play hypotheticals, but just think about this. 2 extra points missed. That's 21 points instead of 19. That very lazy throw, in my opinion, from Trevor on that flea flicker, I think the play got blown up. I think at that point he tried to make something out of nothing, and he can't do that the same way in the NFL game. I think if you hold that ball and you don't, just throw it up, that pick six doesn't happen. You take 7 away from that 31. You're now at 24-21. And I'm thinking that could have been a closer game in the fourth quarter than it actually was. However, then I even thought back to, okay, the botched catch by Jacob Hollister. They got picked off earlier in the first half. We were right on their goal line. We had marched down the field. Jacob Hollister botched a pass right in his hands. It got picked off. Let's say that doesn't happen. And let's say at the very least you get 3 points. It could have been a tied game in the fourth quarter, 24-24, if these common mistakes that we've had don't occur. I don't think the team doesn't have talent. I think we're shooting ourselves in the foot. And until we learn how to stop doing that, we're going to lose. But I think we're on the cusp of seeing a team that's competitive enough to win games and have a quarterback that can win it for us rather than be the one that's kind of hurting us at this point.
And when you talk about expectations, I think part of those expectations is understanding there are going to be those types of mistakes from a team that, quite frankly, hasn't played together often.
Exactly.
There's very little chemistry. They're working through a lot of kinks, a lot of issues that they've maybe had through training camp, really putting it all together. And I feel like this is the type of team or the type of roster that I want to start seeing growth the second and third quarter of the season. And I feel very confident that that is exactly where we are trending. We have a nice matchup coming up against the Bengals. That's going to be a good measuring stick. Now, granted, the Bengals are 2-1, and they outperformed the Steelers in week 3 that a lot of people were not expecting that. We'll get into the Bengals here in a second. But I think this is the turning point in the season. I think this moment of the season is what is going to define not only the direction of the team, but I think the attitude of the fan base. And I say that to say, if we can come out and continue playing competitive well into the third quarter, maybe even into the fourth quarter, and just put products on the field that the fan base can get excited about, then I feel like we are moving in the right direction. Now, if we come out and lay eggs, which I'm sure is going to happen occasionally over the next 15 weeks of the season or 14 weeks of the season, which you would expect from a young team and an inexperienced team, ultimately, as fans, we say this every Sunday, we just want to look competitive. We want to look like we belong. And the Jaguars, for the most part, looked like we belong. And you talked about hypotheticals. You talked about, the dropped passes. You talked about the pick six. Ultimately, on that pick six, best case scenario in that play is a sack. Like at that point, you just want to take the loss of 8 and move forward to the next play. You still hold the 2-point lead. And you move forward with that drive and you try and continue the drive. So, again, a rookie mistake. I think a veteran quarterback understands, hey, this play is broken. Let me fall down. This play is not going in our favor. Let me just fall down on top of the ball.
And to me, those mistakes, while we obviously don't want our number 1 overall pick to be making mistakes, but the mistakes that I see from Trevor Lawrence I'm not capable of making a play type of mistakes. It's more of I'm trying to do too much and those can be brought back. So like on that play, it's not like, oh, I underthrew a pass, or oh, I'm not accurate enough. It's no, you try to do too much. The play was dead, and he's like, I shouldn't have made that play. Um, some of the other picks, I know he talked about, decision making. If his mistakes and like turnovers are based on decision making, that's a better chance of it being fixed and corrected than if someone's just incapable of making a play. And that's kind of what excites me, is if this is what we're looking like, but we have a guy that can make that back corner touchdown pass to DJ Chark that I've not seen in Jacksonville. He has these flash plays. Each week, I would say he's had a flash like touchdown play. And I feel like soon, once he kind of corrects some mistakes in terms of turnovers, those will turn into flash games where now instead of it being like, wow, that touchdown was amazing, be like, wow, he just threw for 350 yards, 2 or 3 touchdowns, and like maybe 1 interception max or something, where that's when we'll see him progress. And once he does that, I think the team overall progresses, because the defense, in my opinion, isn't as bad as people might think it is. And the special teams, if Lambeau is making kicks, might be tops in the league right now, because we have Jamal Agnew, like you mentioned, returning kicks. Logan Cook is, tops in the league right now, basically in net punt average. It's interesting to think that right now it's the offense that's almost holding us back when we have all these fancy new pieces.
Yeah. And first of all, thank you those out there listening, episode 110 here on the Poojie podcast. If you're watching on YouTube and you want to listen on the go find us on Spotify, iHeart, Google, Apple. If you're listening on the go the day after, 2 days after, 3 days after, whenever it may be sure to go check us out on YouTube or on Facebook, the Poojie podcast on Facebook, to watch live when we record either Tuesday or Wednesday night, depending on scheduling. But you talk about those missed kicks, and I think one thing that a lot of people don't understand is, as football fans, as NFL fans, we take points for granted. We take special teams for granted. We take field goals for granted because we're so used to them being automatic. Well, I think we are now seeing the exact opposite. And 19-10 looks a lot closer than 21-10, just from a traditional NFL score goes. So you can't leave points on the board. I said this last week. When you're already a very bad football team, just as far as record goes and roster goes, you can't leave points on the board, because that does two things. It keeps you from being more confident. It keeps your team from building confidence. Like, you can't just score a touchdown and be like, yeah, we just scored 7. You have to worry like, oh, did we score 6 or 7? Or you can't be an offense and march the ball downfield, get to the 20-yard line, and be confident that your kicker can drill a 37-yarder, because you don't know what's going to happen. And then ultimately, it just sets the team up in a bad spot later in the game. You talked about the hypotheticals. We could have been down, 31-21, and it looked a lot better, it looked a lot closer. It just keeps the game being further out of reach than we want. And when you're already a team that doesn't score at will, you really need all the points you can get.
Yeah, I think it's funny because people mostly think about like a last second kick, like, oh my gosh, like he's going to kick this for 50 yards, 55 yards to win the game. And whether they miss it or not, that's like a bummer. But then they don't think like, oh, wow, in the second quarter, there was a missed kick or mixed extra point that we could have been in the lead rather than, behind, or we could have been tied. And so those early misses might not feel like a ton. It might just be like, oh my gosh, Lambeau, what are you doing? But really, when you think about the effect later, that can come back and hurt you. And same way with the pick six, like, make those kicks, don't throw a pick six. The game is a lot closer, and maybe there's more motivation towards the end to put in that extra effort. They're always motivated, but I think when you're like a lot closer, you're just hungrier, and it just naturally comes out of you. So I don't know. What do you think? Are they going to give Lambeau past Thursday night? Like, let's say Lambeau struggles Thursday night. Do you think that's the final straw? Or do you think is it like a 2-week thing? I mean, we brought Matthew Wright, charge on, go UCF, but Matthew Wright's now on the practice squad. So that's obvious that, okay, we're going to have competition for you now. Maybe that gets him right. Maybe he comes out Thursday night, makes some kicks, makes a long one. I don't know. Is this Thursday night his final chance?
Yeah, I mean, you'd have to think so. The reason I say yes is because this is an 0-3 team as it is. So if you can go out and just cycle through kickers every few weeks until you find the right one, maybe that's a piece that you can use going forward. Remember when we found Josh Lambeau, when we got him from the Chargers? we were a god-awful team
Yeah.
really at the time, but we found a kicker that was consistent enough in Jacksonville back in 2016. He came in, performed well enough, and then he was a pretty big part of the 2017 team that made the AFC Championship run just because of how consistent he was, how reliable he was. So right now, as an 0-4 team or an 0-3 team, there's no reason to keep a kicker on that is so inconsistent and so unreliable because you're not building really right in the present time. You're not building towards anything. You might as well go out and try new kickers until you find the right one, which if you look back to training camp, we had Aldrick Rosas on the team with Josh Lambo. And man, did Urban Meyer make a big mistake there, not keeping Rosas instead of Lambo. But hindsight's 2020, and you move forward with those decisions. And who knows what's going to happen? I say last chance for Lambo. I'd say he has to be 100% this week on extra points and field goals. I think the leash is at the very end. He's at the collar. There's no leniency. One missed kick this week, he should be gone.
I think
it's pointless.
I think my thing is with Lambo, like for instance, Jason Myers, when he was here, I don't think he ever really performed at a level that Lambo has. So when he's playing bad, yes, get rid of him. What's really hard for me to want Lambo to be gone at this current point is because we saw for years how accurate he was for us and how big he came for us. And like if you think about, everybody kind of has their own kicker, and there's kickers everywhere, but like Jason Myers leaves and he performs well elsewhere. I think the difference for me is that we saw Lambo do it here. So is it truly like a mental thing? Is there some kind of injury related thing, like he had a surgery with his hip or whatever he had? Like, is there a way to, if it was injury related, I know people have been talking about this like on Twitter, on the radio. Is there a way of him maybe just going on IR to get right? We bring in another kicker for this year, and then maybe he gets a chance next year, like once he's like fully healthy. I just don't know what it is, but it's hard to let go someone that's been so great for us. Like he was arguably a top kicker in the league if he had the volume, but we just weren't a great offense to give him that volume.
No, and I agree. It's difficult to let go of a fan favorite. It's difficult to let go of someone that was so good for you for so long. We saw on the tail end of Josh Goby's career, he kind of started to decline a little bit, and he ended up going to Pittsburgh, and that was difficult for the fan base, I know, to kind of deal with that. And then we had Jason Myers, who we couldn't get out of town fast enough. But if you look at what Josh Lambo's done over the last 3 games, he's performed at a worse rate than Jason Myers ever did between any of his 3 games, if you took any 3-game sample size of Jason Myers. So I think ultimately it does come down to being injury related. I asked this the other day, and maybe Kyle Verban would be better to ask this to, but I don't know if kicker is maybe the most important muscle memory position on the field, as far as, because you're only doing one thing really the entire time through practice, through training camp, your muscle memory becomes so much more, it strengthens so much to where once you do have that surgery or you do have an injury, how long does it take for you to get back to your normal self? And that would be the question I have, is because you're so used to doing something one way for so long, is his plant foot in a different spot? Does he not have as much flexibility in his hips because of the surgery or whatever the case is? I don't know. I'm speculating, but I think it's one of those things where he's just simply not trusting himself from the surgery. And now he's missing kicks. So that lack of trust, that lack of self-trust is just going to continue to compound upon itself. So
yeah, I mean, the motion of a kick is like, you play golf. I feel like it's just that point of contact. It's not like catching a football or throwing it where it's like you can kind of, move your body and try to go for something. It's that point of contact, whatever it was like kind of aiming to, that's where it's going to go, or that's how it's going to hit. And that could also then end up coming from a snap. I hope he gets it right, because I think, Lambo is one of the top kickers if he's healthy, and I'm hoping that's why he's missing kicks. I'm hoping it's not a mental thing.
Yeah, and luckily here, I'll say this before we move on to Cincinnati. Luckily, he's not losing us football games. Like, we're not close enough in these games
exactly
to where he's losing us the games, as bad as that is to say. But hypothetically speaking, let's say the Cardinals were up 21-19 and then Lambo comes down and drills a 45-yarder. Does that right all the wrongs of the first 3 weeks because now we've won the game? Like, is that Is that what the fan base wants, or is it the consistency that they're more concerned about? Because if he
Yeah,
comes down and drills a 45-yarder to win, now the missed
it's
kicks mean
got to
nothing.
be the consistency. Like, we'll be
Yeah,
happy in the moment, but it's like if you have a guy make one 3-point shot to win an NBA game, but he's shooting 25% of the season, you're not like, okay, that's our three
that's a
point
3-point
shooter.
shooter.
So he's gotta have the consistency.
Well, let's move on to Cincinnati. Thursday night football coming up. Jacob, I want you to take it for a second and tell us about Cincinnati. Tell us what we got coming up.
Well, yeah, I'm actually just looking at the game like preview on ESPN. It's going to be interesting because it's the battle between two number one picks. These guys played each other in a national championship, and Joe Burrow got the best of Trevor Lawrence. So maybe this is a revenge game. I don't really know, but it's a young team that we're playing. They haven't been good, but right now they're doing pretty good. They just beat the Steelers. Joe Mixon, he's a threat. They got Jamar Chase. He's been balling out. They said at one point. He's like, I was having trouble catching the NFL ball. I think he's doing just fine now. T. Higgins, I think the offense has a lot of weapons. They're young weapons. I'm not too familiar with the defense, to be honest with you. It looks like I'm just looking at like they've allowed 78 yards per game rushing. So I don't know if that's based on who they've played or if they're a good run defense. That'll be a good matchup because James Robinson just had his breakout game, in my opinion. The Jags started rushing the ball. I guess that'll be something we hope to see against the Bengals is can we get that continued moving to another game so Trevor Lawrence can play off of that.
Yeah, I think ultimately the best way for me to describe it with this week is these are two teams heading in the exact same direction. While one is 2-1, the other's 0-3. But the Bengals realistically are 1 year ahead of the Jaguars just from the fact that they had Joe Burrow for a year, and obviously they have Joe Mixon. He's been a staple there for quite some time. But these are two teams that if you were to kind of pick two teams to be as similar as possible, these would be two teams that you would look at and say, okay, the direction of their franchise, what's going on with their composition, their team composition. They're two very similar teams. And just kind of taking a look at it, Bengals week 1, 27-24 over the Vikings. And then week 2, they suffered their only loss of the season to the, let me see here, to the Bears, 20-17. And then this week, they obviously upset the Steelers, as much of an upset as that could be. I don't know if the Steelers are legit or not.
And I think that's my thing is like I don't think the Steelers are playing too hot. It's hard to judge what are the Bengals right now? Are they legit? Are they like turning a corner, or have they they played the Bears, which they lost to them, and I think the Bears just who they just play and like struggled
the Bears just got destroyed by the Browns. The Browns.
That's a pretty solid team. I mean, the Browns control the game very well with their run game and their defenses with Myles Garrett. So it's tough to judge. I guess we just have to see what we show up and play. But I don't want to say them beating the Steelers tells me too much yet because we need to see what are the Steelers actually like when it's all said and done.
And that's dead accurate. And the way I look at it is the Bengals have not had that slap in the face game yet. Like they have not gone up against a contender just yet. People thought the Steelers might have been, but going Vikings, Bears, Steelers for the first 3 weeks, that sample size, that's a relatively calm first 3 games. And now even with the Jags in week 4, this is not going to be that slap in the face game either. I don't believe, at least. But their first 3 games, they're 2-1. The Panthers are 3-0. The Broncos are 3-0. But then the Rams are 3-0. But no one would sit here and say the Rams and the Cardinals are the same 3-0
exactly
as the Panthers and Broncos. So some teams have these records by way of just matchups and by way of scheduling. So I think honestly, this might tell us more about the Bengals than this will about the Jaguars. I think we know a lot about the Jaguars already just being in Jacksonville and what we have in our team. But if the Bengals come out and lay an egg on Thursday Night Football, I think people are going to start looking at them as kind of a pretender 2-2 team. And people are going to look at the Jags as, okay, they're just another 1-3 team. It is what it is. So I think the Bengals have a lot at stake here because if they can get to 3-1, let's see who they have in week 5, actually. If the Bengals can get to 3-1, and then, okay, here's their slap in the face game, the Packers in week 5. So if they're 3-1 going into that game at home against the Packers, that changes the direction of their season too. So it will be interesting to see. I don't know much about the Bengals defense at all, just like you said. In fact, you probably could offer me $100 to name 3 starters on the Bengals defense, and I would not win the money. But just from the standpoint of the team seems to be at 2-1, but we need to figure out. I think this week is going to show NFL fans everywhere if the Bengals are legit or not. Now it is a home game for the Bengals, and I know that the crowd there being at 2-1 is going to be very excited to have this Thursday night football game on short rest. But honestly, as shitty of a game as it is for people on the outside looking in, I'm extremely excited about this game. I think as Jaguar fans, this is a very good measuring stick for us to kind of see where we match up with another team in a similar spot. And like you mentioned, Joe Burrow versus Trevor Lawrence, 2 running attacks that are kind of similar with Joe Mixon and James Robinson. Both teams have a pretty solid core of receivers, 3 on both sides with Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, and then DJ Chark, Laviska Shenault, and Marvin Jones. So I think when you look at it, this is a very mirrored matchup.
Yeah. I don't like they could probably look at our defense and not, who's on the Jags defense? I have no idea. I mean, I'm sure like people around the league know of Miles Jack, but other than that, it's like maybe Shaquille Griffin, and then they're like, who's on the Jags defense? So it could be a similar situation. I just want to see our offense continue to put together drives that don't end in turnovers. I feel like the first week it was like they weren't really moving the ball. The second week they moved it on the first drive and then not the rest of the game. This last week they moved it throughout the game, but then had turnovers. So I'm hoping we just see some drives that lead to points, and we our defense. I really do think our defense might be a little bit better than we're thinking it is. I don't think it's nearly close to being like top 10, top 15, but I think it can hold its own. Stopping the run, that's going to be important with Joe Mixon. And I think Joe Burrow is very mobile, but he's definitely no Kyler Murray. There was a couple times we got close to Kyler Murray, and I'm like, man, maybe if the guy wasn't as quick as him, we would have had some sacks.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm really curious to see how they play under the lights. I just hope it's not a common Jags just put up a goose egg or put some terrible performance on primetime. I hope it's competitive where the world can see, okay, Trevor's coming along and he's improving, and this is why he's the number 1 overall pick.
Yeah. And looking at the Steelers game, they win 24-10, but just kind of some things to put out there. Burrow, extremely efficient, 14 of 18 for 172 yards, 3 touchdowns and 1 interception. So he wasn't gashing the Steelers for tons of yardage. He was just kind of getting the job done. Joe Mixon, 18 carries for 90 yards. James Robinson had 15 carries for 88 yards. So very similar, averages there. And then as far as the receivers went, Jamar Chase, 4 catches, and 2 of those were touchdowns. So from what I'm looking at, it looks like they maybe just had short fields during the game.
I would take my money that Shaquille Griffin on Jamar Chase, for calling him the number 1 receiver. Shaquille Griffin he was injured. He was a game time decision, but he held DeAndre Hopkins to 3 catches for 26 yards. So I would like to say that, he could hold up on Jamar Chase. Tyson Campbell, who's the 2? Is it Tyler Boyd? Is it T. Higgins?
I think it's Tyler Boyd and then T. Higgins.
If you're playing fantasy or daily fantasy for Thursday, probably play not Jamar Chase, but T. Higgins or someone, because I'm sure Tyson Campbell, who's starting now since CJ Henderson has been sent off, he's probably going to have a decent game because, let's be honest, Tyson Campbell's still pretty young. That's where I would say our defense kind of has a hole, not because he's bad or not talented, but it's just because he's young and he's still learning to not make those big mistakes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Maybe that's the thing, is maybe it's going to be the, T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd versus Laviska Shenault and DJ Chark, and, Marvin Jones and Jamar Chase. Maybe they aren't as present in this game. Who knows what's going to happen. But what I will say is I think I'm more excited for this game because of the performance against the Cardinals. Had we come out against the Cardinals and looked like we did against the Texans or against the Broncos, this game wouldn't really be as meaningful to me. But I am somewhat excited just from the standpoint of I want to continue to see that growth. You just said it a little bit ago. You want to see us continue to put drives together. Like, we're not a team yet that's necessarily good enough to put, quarters together or halves together or games together. But let's just get drives. Like, let's just put drives together. Let's score a touchdown, get a stop, and then maybe go down and get a field goal. Like, let's just put things together to look good. The Thursday night games, the night games for the Jaguars always scare me because they do always, outside of that one game against the Titans like 3 or 4 years ago, they do always show up kind of flat. But generally speaking, I am pretty excited for this game. Anything else from you on this game against Cincinnati?
I think it's just going to be just any game in the NFL. Honestly, it's just going to be turnovers. I think both of these teams have talent. I think they're both pretty young talent. Does Trevor Lawrence keep the ball, from getting picked off as much, or no fumbles? Like, that's going to be the name of the game. I think they're two talented quarterbacks, two talented receiving cores, two defenses that aren't, at least in my opinion, like necessarily great, but necessarily bad.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just like, who takes care of the ball, and that could be the name of the game. Hopefully it's not something that we're just surprised after a surprise performance against the Cardinals.
Yeah, I think these are two hungry teams as well. I think the Bengals are hungry to get to 3-1 and kind of show the nation that, hey, we aren't, just a fluke. We didn't just play a weak schedule. We are, they want to come out here and dominate the Jags. They don't want to just win. But then on the other hand, the Jaguars, I know we're extremely hungry for our first win of the season. And I think the locker room recognizes that this might be one of the best opportunities. But let's look elsewhere. Week 3 in the NFL, Bills over Washington football team, 43-21. The Bills are just clicking. I think we all expected the Bills to dominate this game, or at least win this game, but maybe not dominate the way they did. But they're just clicking, and Josh Allen looks really good. Did you get a chance to read or see any about this game?
I didn't really see much of it, but I know that, it seemed like the Bills played super well. But are the Bills that great? I don't think they're not great. Or I'm just trying to gauge the Washington football team's defense, because last year that was arguably what sent them to the postseason. That defense was so good.
Mm-hmm.
Their offense wasn't, anything to write home about, but despite that, they still dominated with the defense. And it's like, is that defense not where it was? Or are the Bills are they going to be that scary this year? Because Josh Allen's an MVP candidate. I don't even think they used Stephon Diggs that much. It was, not even having that guy be prolific in the game, and they did that to the Washington football team.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's you said, it's so early.
That's right. It's so tough to gauge teams after week 3. Just really, you almost need until week 5 or 6 until there's a good enough sample size to really see what these teams are. Browns destroy the Bears 26-6. Justin Fields sacked 9 times, 1 total passing yard. So the Bears are in shambles. Maybe they're in a worse spot right now than the Jaguars are.
He had 1 total passing yard?
Yeah, because of all the sack yardage.
I did not know that.
He had 67 passing yards and 66 yards lost because of sacks. So that was pretty awful. Let's talk about this real quick. Ravens, Lions. If we think we have it rough as Jags fans and we feel like we get heartbroken, I think the Lions are maybe the most cursed franchise in NFL history. I don't even know what the word would be, but the 2 longest field goals in NFL history have come against the Lions. Wow. And the Ravens convert a 4th and 19. Matt, you want to say something?
I don't even know what this is on right now.
Matt's going crazy listening to this. The Ravens convert a 4th and 19. All right, Matt needs to say something.
Greatest kick in NFL history, hands down.
Greatest kick in NFL history. 4th and 19, they convert it, okay? And then they get down the field, stop the clock, and a 66-yard field goal to win the game that goes off the crossbar and bounces in. So 2 things I want to note here. 2 things. How often do we see kicks hit off the crossbar and just bounce out? That seems to be the more traditional thing to happen. And then second, if you watch the video from afar, from a distance, from above, watching a team kick from the other side of the field is the weirdest shit in the NFL. Like it was just almost uncomfortable watching it happen. He was kicking from the other team's 45-yard line.
Yeah, and it makes it weird to know because these guys kick long kicks in pregame, but it's always different when you're going to have like an offensive and defensive line arguably like in front of you, and you have to like make sure it gets the distance, but also gets over them. It's just not common. I think Urban Meyer was, doing an interview today on the radio and said, when you see a guy like in our game go for a 68-yard and he's standing on the other side of the 50, it's just like absurd. But
yeah, it is a weird feeling. But so the Ravens get that done. They moved to 2-1. So I mean, that was a big bullet dodged for them. And I know a lot of people had the Ravens in their Survivor League as well. So Titans beat the Colts 25-16. Nothing crazy about this game. I think that's what everyone expected. However, the AFC South is a combined 3-9 on the year. 3-9. The Jags and the Colts are both 0-3. The Titans are 2-1 and the Texans are 1-2. So who would have thought the Texans are in second place after 3 weeks of the season? Not me. Chargers. All right. Here's the deal. Chargers beat the Chiefs 30-24. And I said this to my brother this weekend. This is one of those games where the Chargers and the Chiefs, that whole division, the AFC West, they always seem to play each other so well. Like there's never a game in the AFC West where you're just like, that's going to be a blowout. Whether it's the Broncos, whether it's the Raiders, the Chiefs, the Chargers, those teams play each other so well all the time. It's amazing.
Yeah, and the other thing too is Patrick Mahomes is so good. But even last year we saw, at one point the Chiefs were always like blowing people out, and they got to the Super Bowl and they won it. Offense beat great defense. But last year they weren't blowing people out. They were just winning a lot of games that were falling in their favor. Like they were close games. So we weren't seeing them just dominate. When you're playing in close games and you're winning one year, now we're seeing the other domino of where it kind of evens out. It regresses to the mean, and they're still a good team. I think Herbert and that team's still very good as well. So maybe the Chiefs, they're not nearly as dominant as they once were, but they're still pretty good.
Well, I'm glad you said that. And obviously in the NFL, the league, it's probably has the most parity out of any league in professional sports, just from the standpoint of really it takes one player to change your direction of your franchise. And that's what Justin Herbert has kind of done for the Chargers. But in saying that about the Chiefs are 1-11-1 against the spread in their last 13 games. So what that means is they have not covered the spread, and they've been favorites in all of those games, except for maybe the Super Bowl, but I still think they were the favorite in the Super Bowl. But they're 1-11-1 in their last 13 games against the spread. So when you look at their record, you're right, they're winning games, but they're not doing what we were used to them doing back in 2019 or the beginning of 2020. So the Chiefs, they kind of seem, it's almost like one of those like the tape is out kind of things. People know how to beat the Chiefs now.
Yeah, and I wouldn't say like the tape's out on them where it's like, oh, they won't ever succeed. It's more like, the tape's out, like we're not going to let you demolish us by 30 points anymore.
Yeah,
we're going to be able to keep you in check. But at the end of the day, when you have Patrick Mahomes and Tyreek Hill, some of those plays are still going to spill over the edge of the glass and happen. But like maybe it's like you said, like they were almost beating people like it was a college team, and now it's just more they're a strong NFL team.
More competitive. Yeah, I mean, those explosive plays are going to happen. That was another thing about the Cardinals game I was happy about. There weren't many explosive plays that felt like our team was lost outside of the pick six, but we kept the Cardinals offense pretty much in check. Kyler went for 316 in the air, but for the most part, there weren't many big chunk plays. There was a lot of what's up?
For me, when you say that, I thought about that. When we were watching the game, did you almost were you thinking about that like, okay, we're not really having them go down the field on us, but like you didn't want to say it because you didn't want to jinx it. You didn't want to bring it up like, wow, our defense is actually holding, the Cardinals offense pretty well, because it's like, all right, at some point they're going to throw one deep over us. Like I was really surprised at halftime we had only let up 7 points.
It was like a Twilight Zone moment where it was like, I went in with all these expectations of them just dominating us. And then when that wasn't happening, it was almost like I was stunned. Like I had been like hit with a stun grenade. Like, whoa,
And it's
wait,
like,
this
you
is
don't
not what I
say
expected.
anything, it might continue.
Yeah, I was like, whoa, that
Just keep
was
quiet.
wild. But anyway, Saints beat the Patriots. No storylines there, really. 28-13. Falcons beat the Giants 17-14. A pretty no one cares about that game either. Bengals, like we mentioned, 24-10 over the Steelers. Cardinals 31-19 over the Jags. Broncos shut out the Jets 26-0. Again, like we mentioned, the Broncos have not had that slap in the face game yet this season. We'll see when that comes for them, but I'm still trying to figure out what the Broncos are. They've played the Jets and the Jags back to back, so that can kind of show you how tough their schedule's been to start the season. This was a crazy game. Raiders Dolphins in Vegas. Dolphins were up like 14-0 to start the game, and then the Raiders battle back, and Raiders end up winning on a field goal in overtime. So a heartbreaking loss for the Dolphins. Did you get to see any of that?
I know, no, I did not, but I know like Jacoby Brissett was in for Tua, and it's Derek Carr on his own right. Like, we're still early in the season, as we keep saying, but he looks like he's playing really well. I mean, he's having like a ton of yardage, so they're really like letting him throw the ball. And then I've heard their defense is actually, doing really well too. They have some of those guys that you probably don't think immediately of as like defensive like stars, but they're playing solid. What do you make of Tua versus like Jacoby Brissett? Like, I still feel like we haven't seen Tua really like let it go. I mean, he's now hurt currently, but
Yeah.
pretty close game with Jacoby Brissett at quarterback, and I don't feel like it was necessarily more production than we were seeing from Tua. I don't know if we'll see that or if they'll move on.
So I'm happy you say that. All the losses that the Dolphins have accumulated while Tua was the quarterback, how many of them were because of him or in spite of him versus the victories that they had? How many of their wins have been because of Tua versus because of maybe the defense or because of the running attack? I just, and this is no shit talking to Dolphin fans out there. I know a lot of our friends are Dolphin fans, but after a sample size and so many injuries, again, a huge injury in college, and then coming into the NFL with now 2 injuries happening in back-to-back seasons, you have to start wondering, is he the guy that is ever going to take that next step forward and become the reason you win games? Like, become why you win games? Like, great quarterbacks, good quarterbacks, we talk about this, good quarterbacks in the NFL are on teams that win games. Great quarterbacks in the NFL are reasons why teams win games. And I just don't know if Tua is a reason why the Dolphins win games. And sure, maybe he'll have a game or two here where he pops off and goes out and wins games. But there's just differences in quarterbacks. And I feel like you talked about the production between Brissett and Tua. Like, if I'm a Dolphins fan, I'm kind of excited as to what I saw in Brissett. Now, that being said, I don't think Brissett's necessarily the long-term answer either. But I think you're learning more about Tua not being the long-term answer than you are about Brissett being the long-term answer.
Yeah, and to be fair to our friends that are Dolphins fans and any Dolphins fans, it's like, I don't watch Dolphins games. And I think that's very important when you talk about other people's teams or when you talk about teams in general. Unless you watch, you don't necessarily know what the dynamic is or how things look. So I'm not going to say anything bad about Tua overall. I just know like we have yet to hear about him like really popping off, or Jacoby Brissett we hear played pretty well and had them in the game. Because I'm the same way. I mean, you see my Magic shirt on right now. There's a few guys on the Magic that I would argue with people have pretty good potential, but most people don't watch the Magic to know or see what I see. So I'm going to say the same thing with Miami. I just know that's a good team. They have a really good team, and right now it's just like they need that quarterback play. Tua was hurt before, now he's hurt again, and that just is what they're missing, I feel.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to watch kind of where things go for them. Dolphins, first team in NFL history to ever allow a safety, to ever have a safety against them on a completed pass that went towards the line of scrimmage and there was no flags involved. So it wasn't like intentional grounding or holding in the end zone. So first team in NFL history to allow a safety on a completed pass. They tried to do a bubble screen and had 0 receivers on the outside to block, and that was just a really bad play.
Backed up and they went for a bubble screen. I feel like that's really dangerous.
Jalen Waddle literally caught the ball 2 yards deep into the end zone.
That's dangerous, man. I wouldn't
Like
I wouldn't
it
be
was,
messing with that. Like if the Jags did that, I'd be like, oh yeah, they're idiots.
yeah, it's just
Miami
wild.
doing
All right,
that?
next
I'm
game,
surprised.
Buccaneers, Rams. Rams win out in LA 34-24. First time Tom Brady's ever played in the city of Los Angeles, which is kind of an interesting stat being that he's played since like 1982. So it's first time he's played in Los Angeles. If you had to put $100 down right now, would this be the NFC Championship matchup you expect to see? Yes or no?
I would put my money on saying that I believe that the Rams will be there. I think the Rams are legit. And I want to say that, yeah, I'd probably put my money on the Bucks being there too. I'm still trying to figure out, have they just played really good like teams, or like maybe this Bucks defense isn't as strong as it was last year. But that might not even matter. I think this has very, very good shot of being like the championship game.
Yeah.
But I really like the Rams. Ever since they got Matthew Stafford, I feel like that just completed everything because their defense is so nasty. When you have names like Aaron Donald and Jalen Ramsey headlining on the same defense, and then like Robert Woods, Cooper Kupp's playing out of his mind. Matthew Stafford just completes it all, and I think it allows Sean McVay to just do what he wants. And when they play against a great team like Brady and the Bucks, I think they're potentially my Super Bowl pick
Yeah.
to win. So that'd be an exciting matchup for sure.
Yeah, I would say this would be the matchup pending Packers over the next few weeks. I do kind of want to see the Packers more, but I think what's interesting is out of the last 3, 4, 5 years, we've seen the Rams make so many trades and so many moves to try and get Marcus Peters, to get Jalen Ramsey, Michael Brockers. You have Aaron Donald. You had all these, defensive players that they ended up having to get rid of. And it looked like for a second, everything that they had worked towards, it felt like they missed their window. And then everything started falling apart. And then they go out and get Matthew Stafford. And it's like, wow, maybe that was the piece the whole time that they needed to get in there. Maybe they were trying to build too much around Jared Goff. And I'll say this in this way. The way the Rams built up the defense for Jared Goff is kind of how the Jaguars built up the defense for Blake Bortles, where they built up this defense almost to help win games in spite of Jared Goff. Whereas now they have Matt Stafford. They can go
Yeah.
out there and win games because of Matt Stafford.
And it's just like you literally just said it. It's like good teams make good quarterbacks. This is a team that's the quarterback's making the team even better.
Yeah, it's
And
absurd to see what's happening.
that team was already good.
Yeah, so they've got weapons. They're going to be dangerous to mess with. I think the Jaguars play them this year, so
Oh,
that'll be
geez, do we really?
that'll be tough.
That's god awful.
I think we play them at some point.
Yeah,
Um,
week 15.
Vikings with a mini upset over the Seahawks. I do think the Vikings were favored by maybe 1.5 points. I don't know what's going on with the Seahawks, but that's another team that's 1-2, and they're not looking too hot either. Packers 30-28 over the 49ers. I think by this point, everyone's heard it. They left 37 seconds on the clock for Aaron Rodgers, which for 30 other quarterbacks in the NFL, plenty of, not enough time to score. And Aaron Rodgers picks up like 50 yards to Devontae Adams in 2 consecutive plays. Mason Crosby drills the 51-yarder to win the game against the 49ers. So that was
Very
a
impressive.
pretty impressive game just in general. I think that was a big game for the Packers after that week 1 collapse and then kind of coming back in week 2. Yeah, they beat the Lions. Great, but I feel like this was a pretty good statement win for them. And then Cowboys completely dominated the Eagles. I think that the Cowboys-Eagles game, I think, says more about the direction of the Eagles than it does about the Cowboys, to be honest with you. I think I am more pessimistic about Jalen Hurts and the Eagles now than I am optimistic about Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb moving forward, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely, because I think it was Cowboys Bucks was the first game of the season, right?
Yep.
And Dak went off, despite losing that game. I think that Dak and that offense is a top tier elite passing attack and offense because they also have Ezekiel Elliott. I don't really know much about their defense, but I don't think it's anything dominant. We were expecting probably more, better, like more of a defensive performance from the Eagles, maybe to keep this game closer. But Dak was too much, and I don't think Jalen took advantage of the Cowboys defense. I think Jalen Hurts. That I'm still up in there on that. I know Devo, somewhere listening. Hopefully, You got to prove it to me. I mean, at the end of the day, our teams are 1-1 apart.
Yeah,
So
and
riddle me
honestly,
this.
the whole Jalen Hurts thing kind of feels like the Tua thing right now, where it's like, okay, you know what he can be, you know what he has been, you know he has talent in different places, but watching that game yesterday, it was one of those things where it was almost like the Cowboys were like picking the stitches out of a wound, and then they finally got to the last one, and then the wound opened back up, and that's
Yeah.
exactly what happened. Like the Eagles, it was 7-7, and then it was 14-7, and then the Eagles got the ball back, and then the Cowboys score another touchdown, and it's 20-7 going into halftime. Eagles come out and score a touchdown to make it 20-14, and then it's like, okay, they're back in this game, and then the Cowboys just asserted their dominance over a lacking offense. And who knows? Maybe the Cowboys defense is a lot better than we're giving them credit for. They do have Dan Quinn now, his first year with the team, so maybe he's found something in them. And Micah Parsons is playing great. He's a very pure tackler.
Yeah, and it's not completely fair to just compare Jalen Hurts and Dak, because if Dak's healthy, like, he's an elite quarterback in the league currently.
Yeah.
And when he's throwing to people like CeeDee Lamb, or he has Amari Cooper, I don't even know, was Amari Cooper playing last night, or was he
Yeah,
hurt?
he played.
So it's like you have Amari Cooper, CeeDee Lamb, even Michael Gallup versus Devontae Smith's good, Jalen Reagor. I don't even know who else is the receiver. I didn't even watch the whole game.
They
But
have
it's like,
Arcega-Whiteside, right? Is he still on the team?
oh, JJ Arcega-Whiteside, yeah. So
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, it's not fair to, like, okay, this is Dak and this is Jalen, so Jalen must not be good. But yeah, we definitely want to see Jalen Hurts string together multiple weeks of great play to hope that he's the answer for the Eagles. I know Devin wants him to be. I think he has a lot of talent. If you just get that passing game going with him, he's so deadly running the ball.
Yeah. And here's the sad reality of it is if he's not the answer, then the Eagles fans are back to square one. And granted, they drafted him. What was he, late first round, or was he second round, early second round?
No idea, to be honest.
They didn't spend super high capital on him. He wasn't like a top 5 pick or a top 10 pick. But it's tough. Like, anytime you see a quarterback that you're so hopeful for fail, not only are you saddened as a fan base, but you also realize what that means for your team. Like, you're back to square one. And as the Jags lost Blake Bortles a few years back, it kind of felt the same way. It was like, man, now which direction do we go in? Now where are we going? We're relying on this 6th round quarterback Gardner Minshew. And then I think that's why us drafting, Trevor Lawrence was such a breath of fresh air, because it's like, okay, now we have the building block that we're building on top of. With the Eagles, it was just kind of like, we think we have something in this guy. We're not sure if we do, but let's see what he can do. Let's see what happens.
Yeah.
And I hope for the sake of Eagles fans everywhere, it is the answer, because obviously we know just about as good as anyone how difficult it is to be a fan of a team that doesn't have good quarterback play. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. And Dak looks fully healthy again. So the Cowboys, that could be another sleeper team in the NFC.
Yeah, he was running around out there. He was actually moving around. So
moving forward. So I apologize to everyone out there on the Instagram or listening. I forgot to post the 3-piece combo contest on Thursday this past week. Got caught up with football, got caught up with my brother coming into town, doing different stuff with family. So I apologize, but excuses are like buttholes. Everyone has them and they stink. So no more excuses moving forward. Let's get into the 3-piece combo for week 4, Jacob. Let's pick these games real quick.
Ooh.
I'm going to go through the 1 o'clock games, and we got to decide on one. Washington at Falcons, Washington at Atlanta, Texans at Bills, Lions at Bears. First of all, that Texans at Bills game, 16.5-point spread. So
Jesus.
Lions at Bears, Panthers at Cowboys, Colts at Dolphins, Browns at Vikings, Giants at Saints, Titans at Jets, Chiefs at Eagles. Those are the 1 o'clock games. Is any of those kind of enticing at all? Or
what was, name the last 3 real quick again?
Colts Dolphins, Browns Vikings, Giants Saints, Titans Jets, Chiefs Eagles.
So 2 that kind of popped out to me were either Panthers Cowboys or Browns Vikings. Maybe because the Panthers are 3-0. Maybe that's their litmus test this week, is against the Cowboys.
I like that. Yeah, I say we go for that one. I say
is Sam Darnold turning a corner?
I say, yeah, Sam Darnold, I said this the other day on Twitter at JPooch17. Sam Darnold having a Ryan Tannehill-esque resurrection in Carolina must be something to do with that
what he's got.
mid-East Coast. So that's the 1 o'clock games. Then 4 o'clock games we have Cardinals at Rams. I feel like we can just stop there.
Keep going though. I want to see.
Seahawks at Niners. Ravens at Broncos. Steelers at Packers.
Yeah, I would say it's got to be Cardinals against Rams.
Now, granted, Rams are favored by 4.5. The closest spread for the 4 o'clock game is Broncos Ravens, which is a 1-point favorite for the Broncos. But let's go Cardinals Rams this week. Just because that 2-3-0 teams, and it's going to be a fun one. And then, of course, the Sunday night game, you have Tom Brady returning with the Buccaneers to New England to face off against his former team, the New England Patriots, one of the most highly anticipated matchups in probably NFL history as far as regular season games go.
And they've been teasing that game with Adele's what's that song called? It's like
Hello from the Other Side.
Yeah, so like it's gonna be crazy, and I think Brady's already been quoted saying he's not expecting a happy reunion. He's not expecting to get flowers like roses when he arrives. I think it's gonna be interesting. It's gonna be cool to see. I think what I heard was he's close to potentially to like jumping in the all-time passing record or something. Let me look this up.
I think he's like 40 yards away from Drew Brees, I want to say.
For being number one. That's crazy. And he could do it in this game against his former team. Is it in Foxborough?
Yeah, it's in Foxborough.
Oh my God. Wouldn't that just be biblical?
This, honestly, as far as regular season games go, this might be like the most expensive ticket on the market this whole season. Ever.
The GOAT returns home. The GOAT returns to his farm.
It's going to be wild. I mean, he pretty much built up Foxborough with the help of obviously Robert Kraft, but that'll be a fun one to watch. We'll definitely
he's gonna get it. He's only 67 yards away.
Yeah, I knew it was something very close.
Oh, geez. So yeah, this is amazing.
It's gonna be awesome. A great Sunday night, and I'm happy. Honestly, I'm happy the Jags play Thursday night this week because that gives us all of Sunday to just literally veg out and just sink into a couch,
watch our fantasy teams,
and just watch Red Zone, watch fantasy. Yeah, who knows? Maybe watch party at the Slightly Twisted Deck Bar. Who knows? But let's get into predictions for Thursday Night Football. Cincinnati at home versus your Jacksonville Jaguars. Let's let you make the first prediction, Jacob.
Dang. It's tough because I feel like if we want them to win, I need to not pick them to win. But I really think if we're going to turn a corner and beat a good team, like maybe the Bengals this Thursday night might be that team, but it might get close. And I'll go ahead and pick this game 23-21. And I honestly am torn. You know what? 23-21 Jags. They get their first win. Trevor gets his revenge against Joe Burrow.
I wrote this down. I like it. I wrote this down before you picked. 24-23 Cincinnati. So we are like literally right there. 24-23 Cincinnati.
We both hope it'll be close.
It'll be a close game, and like you said, I kind of picked Cincinnati to favor the football gods of me not getting overzealous.
If it helps my prediction, the reason I think we win, I think Trevor takes better care of the ball. I think Shaq Griffin, I think he gets a pick in this game. I think it's not going to be like a pick six or anything, but I think now that we got one turnover on defense, it was Andrew Wingard. Of course, it was the greatest player on our defense. I think the turnovers will start happening, and I think Shaq gets one against Joe Burrow. I think Trevor keeps it down to like maybe a max of like one turnover, and I think we clean it up, and I think we beat a pretty solid Cincinnati team.
Yeah, it's the nature of the business. I think teams tend to just play better as the season progresses, as they play more together and play at full-time game speed together. So I'm excited. I feel the same way. Hopefully we can continue to progress into this game. This will be a fun one. What do you got, Jacob?
I want to double down. Shaq gets a pick and Rayshawn gets a pick.
So 2 picks, Rayshawn and Shaq. I like it.
Yep.
I like it. Okay, well, I'll go with my double down will be Trevor Lawrence. Let's go with No, there's no way. I put 23. I was going to say 3 touchdowns, but that's really difficult. Maybe they go for 2. But anyways,
Maybe they
those out
miss an
there-
extra point.
maybe they miss an extra point. Those out there listening, I appreciate you guys tuning in to episode 110 of the Poojie podcast, breaking down week 4 of the Jags-Bengals matchup, looking back to the Jaguars-Cardinals matchup from week 3, and all other things NFL. Go on Instagram, find us at the Poojie podcast. Go on YouTube, find us the Poojie podcast. Subscribe, like, share these videos. And if you're listening on the go find us on Spotify, Apple, iHeart, Google. But whatever you do, go enjoy the rest of your week. Enjoy some Thursday night football. I know we're going to enjoy some golf coming up the next few days. Enjoy college football this weekend. UCF is back at it against Navy up in Annapolis, Maryland. And then we got a full day of football on Sunday. But whatever you may be doing, make sure you go make this world a better place and take care.
How can I be the man when you're the man? How can I be the man when you're the man? How can I be the man when you're the man?